Kalt and welcome to Pandora. With the release of Avatar: The Way of Water in less than a week, it's never been a better time to dive into the latest comic series for the franchise, that being the first volume of Avatar: The High Ground, and see what we can learn about the sequel and where its story could be leading in time for its launch. The series is full of new lore and information about the intervening years between the films. For context, as of the time of the first volume, it's been almost a decade since the events of the first film. In that time, many things have changed on Pandora, not just for Jake and the Tiri, but for the Na'vi as a whole. The first change to talk about, and the biggest by far for the characters, is the fact they now have a family. In the intervening years, 3 children have been born to the couple. These are Netayem, their oldest son, Loak, their second oldest, and Tutiri, their youngest daughter. As well as their 3 biological children, they have also adopted 2 offspring. The first is a human orphan called Miles Socorro, known as Spider. It is revealed in the first volume that his mother was a Sekops Scorpion pilot called Paz Sirocco, who was stationed at Hell's Gate during the first film. She became involved with an unknown soldier on the base and gave birth to Miles, making him the first ever human to be born on Pandora. Unfortunately, she was part of Miles Quaritch's squad that attacked the Tree of Souls, and was killed by a Na'vi arrow that pierced the cockpit of her craft. Jake's inner thoughts on this matter makes him feel guilty for her death, as he knew he was partly responsible, leading to him to look after Miles since then. Whether this will be a plot point that will be addressed in The Way of Water is still unknown, but it could make for a powerful moment if Miles was ever to question his allegiance to the Na'vi. Despite being an orphan, he was taken in by a worker on Pandora called Makorska, who along with his wife raised him as their own. In the series, we see that Miles prefers to spend his time in the jungles of the moon, away from his adopted human family, and more with Jake's, seeing himself more as a Na'vi than a human. For those who've heard the name Makorska before, it's because he appeared in the previous comic series for the franchise, that being Avatar: The Next Shadow. This is also a sequel to the first film, but takes place only a few days after. During the course of the series, Makorska is one of the mining workers on Pandora that stayed and was attempting to create a new mining site. Hostilities arose again but were quickly quelled by Jake. Since then, he's been living in Hell's Gate with the rest of the humans who stayed behind, trying to create a new life for himself. It's brilliant to see several nods to The Last Shadow throughout this series, and helps to make the universe feel more connected than ever. Their other adopted child that the comic introduces us to is Kiri, a Na'vi whose origins I shall save for another video entirely. She was taken in by Jake and the Tiri as an orphan, and possesses a unique connection with all life on the moon. We find out in the series that she was able to tame an Ikran at a very young age just by asking it to be her friend. She's also seen visiting an RDA facility throughout the series, watching Jake's old video logs from the first film, and seems fascinated by his old life. She's also formed a strong bond with Spider, as they are often seen together, and tries to include him in the family, despite Natiri's objections. The two seem to have a far greater bond than with any of the other family members, and it will be interesting to see how this bond will be tested in The Way of Water if Spider chooses to be on the opposing side of the conflict. Kiri also affectionately refers to Spider as Monkey Boy, which is quite a funny nickname. Outside of their new family, we also see that changes have happened for the Omatakaya as well. Since the destruction of Home Tree, which we see the remnants of at the start of the series, the clan has been living in a temporary village. However, in the series, they are granted a new home tree by the Council of Elders, which Jake is apprehensive of. Throughout the first volume, we see that he is still struggling with his new life, and still has many human attitudes and ways of thinking. As so, he knows that it's only a matter of time until humanity comes back to Pandora, and wants to ensure that the Na'vi are ready. We see him trying to train his clan and family for that moment by teaching them how to use guns, which is forbidden by the 3 laws of Awa. We find out as well that Norm has become a foster father for a group of Na'vi children, and has become very close with the Omatakaya clan. The other humans who were allowed to stay behind have also gained a place within the clan, and relations have never been better between the two. I'm very much hoping to see Norm and the other humans in The Way of Water, to see where they will stand now the RDA is back on the moon. While most of the first volume is focused on setup, several important events do occur throughout. We first see Loak's attempts to tame an Ikran as his training for the clan. At this point, he is the only one of the older siblings not to have tamed an Ikran, and feels the need to prove himself. During his first attempt, he is thrown off the side of a cliff and falls unconscious, much to the upset of Natiri, who first presumes the worst. However, after several days, he's able to successfully tame his Ikran, which we will no doubt see him on in The Way of Water. Shortly after the Omatakaya are given a new home tree, a bright light in the sky appears, warning Jake that the RDA are back, after some investigating using the now abandoned equipment of Hell's Gate, they find out that a fleet of 10 vessels are heading to the moon and will be in orbit within the next several days. We find out that Jake has been training members of the clan for this moment, and believes that the best way to stop the RDA is by taking the fight to them to get the high ground. As so, Jake begins training the Na'vi in space combat, using an old wreckage of an ISV-class ship in orbit to practice in. Despite this, he doesn't allow Netayem or Loak to join him in space, as he doesn't want them to fight in the upcoming conflict. The scenes showing the zero-gravity training are some of the best in the first volume. I never thought I would enjoy seeing the Na'vi fighting in space, but this story really goes a long way to making them more believable for the story's purposes. It's also fun to see them using old tech that's been left over, including an old Valkyrie shuttle that they used to get into orbit. During this point in the story, we are also introduced to Francis Ardmore, the general of the fleet and the main antagonist of the series and the Way of Water. She's also made it her goal to kill Jake Sully, as he is considered too much of a threat to the RDA's operations. We see her mobilizing a squad for taking down Jake as soon as they make orbit. She will be the main threat of the Na'vi in the Way of Water, so expect her to be centre stage in the story. While she's only briefly appeared in the trailers for the film so far, it's here in High Ground that we get our best look at her and how far she will go to further the RDA's operations. On a side note, she also shares the same last name as a SecOps colonel called James Ardmore, who was killed on Pandora. Could they be related? And if so, could this mean she has more of a personal stake in this conflict than just following her orders? Only time will tell, but it would be great to see another side of her in the film. With the threat of the fleet approaching, Jake tries to convince a council of war that they should fight the humans. However, its most senior member, a Na'vi called Yeyatali, is convinced that peace is the only way to move forward due to the losses they've already suffered in the prior conflict with humanity. He declares that they will try to offer peace to the humans when they arrive. This causes Jake to walk out, but not before he is approached by Akwe, leader of the Olani clan, who gives Jake his support and tells him that he agrees they should fight. I'm really interested to see if any warriors from the clan will appear at the start of the Way of Water, helping the Omatakaya to carry out attacks on the RDA. It would be nice to see the other clans involved in this new conflict, especially as it will affect them all sooner or later. While the first volume focuses on Jake's children, there isn't too much that happens within them that's relevant for the overall story, especially given how the near-death experience they all go through is resolved by the end of the first volume. The only thing I can see having bearing going forward is seeing Neytiri's dislike for Spider grow as she tells him to stay away from them. The first volume makes it clear that she dislikes Spider due to seeing the faces of those who killed her father within him. While Jake tries to convince her that Spider can't be blamed for the sins of his fathers, we clearly see her dislike grow for him over the course of this opening act. I'm very intrigued to see if this ban from Neytiri is still in force in the Way of Water. As we know, Spider is seen spending time with Jake's children. Maybe their scenes together are in secret, which could lead to even more conflict between Neytiri and Spider. The last big plot point to talk about in relation to the film is at the end of the first volume. With the fleet of ships only several days away, a message is broadcast to Hell's Gate from Ardmore. She informs them that they are all illegally occupying Hell's Gate and threatens them all with the sentence of death unless they return the base to the RDA intact. If they do, those that return to the RDA will receive amnesty and re-employment. However, she threatens that if any resistance takes place, she will kill everyone there. Her message sparks fear into many of the humans living on the base, as many believe they could not take on the full force of 10 ships. Many like the idea of reintegration into human society, and some propose time to think about the offer. The volume ends with Jake telling those who wish to fight to come with him now and evacuate the base. It's a brilliant way to end the first volume, and it really makes me believe that some of these humans will accept the General's offer. How many will accept is still unknown, but I could imagine most will. It would make sense that only a small group does go with Jake, as we know despite their best efforts, the RDA is able to set up a permanent base on the moon by the time of the Way of Water. I'm looking forward to seeing how the next 2 volumes will get us to that point though. But that was everything new that I could find in the first volume of Avatar: The High Ground, most of which will play an important part in The Way of Water. As I said in my review of the book, it's a brilliant opening act to the story, and really helps to set up the state of Pandora going into The Way of Water. I'm still very much looking forward to seeing how the other 2 volumes will get us to the opening of the film, but even if you don't get a chance to read them before the release, this is still a great primer. I'm sure there are smaller details that I've missed from this volume, and I'll be sure to dive deeper into all of these when all 3 volumes are available. enjoyable. Until then, if there's any I've missed, I'd love to hear them in the comments below, and I hope this video could help in bringing those who haven't had a chance to read this yet up to speed before the film's release. It's a fantastic story, and one I would recommend everyone tries to read at some point. But what do you think of the new lore and world building from the first volume? Is there any small details that I've missed? And have you had a chance to read the first volume yet? I can't wait to hear all your thoughts down in the comments below. But until then, hej alvaj, gievami.